Startup Grind, DC.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our friend, Joe Payne. Joe, thank you for coming out here, Startup Grind. So we always like to start our fireside chat on a personal note. So let's start way from the beginning, way back. Where were you born? Where were you raised? Perhaps maybe what your parents did. And what is your first entrepreneurial experience as a child? Let's start with that.
Great. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. I was born in Sibley Hospital in Washington, D.C., so I am a local. And can I see a show of hands? Any Redskins fans out there? Right? There's about 4 of us left, right? If I'd ask that, every year I ask that, it gets fewer and fewer and fewer. We can talk Redskins at the end if we have time. My folks were from a small town in North Texas, and my dad was in the Army, and when they moved to Washington, D.C., they said, when they moved to Washington, D.C., in 1963, it was like they had moved to the center of the world compared to where they had come from. And so once they came here from Iowa, where he was stationed before, they said, D.C.'s awesome, we're going to put our roots down here. And so I come from a family of 4 boys. A lot of sports played, a lot of competition. I'm a total homer when it comes to sports teams. I'm a Caps fan. I'm a Wizards fan. Bullets, really, but, Wizards. I'm a Redskins fan. And I was a lifelong Maryland fan until January of 1984. And that was the year that I was a freshman at Duke. And I told all my classmates and my friends, I'm like, look, guys, I've been rooting for Maryland all my life. So, this game, I'll be rooting for the Terps. And we get inside Cameron Indoor Stadium, and the place is going nuts. And 4 of the guys on the team, I know. My freshman English partner is the point guard of Duke's basketball team. And so I'm like, who am I kidding? I don't even know any of the Maryland guys. I'm rooting for Duke. And so ever since, I've dumped the Terps. And I know there's probably I know there's at least one Terp fan in the audience because he's a good friend of mine. And so anyway, I'm a real homer here. As far as my first entrepreneurial experience, I'm like most of you. I was cutting grass by the age of 13 and had 7 lawns that I kept all the way through college. I was always doing stuff like that. In college, I was the guy on campus. I was the T-shirt representative for TS Designs. And that means if you were a fraternity or sorority or a club and you were throwing a party and you needed T-shirts way back when, you couldn't order that stuff online like you can today. There was no online. You found me on campus, and I made up your T-shirts and had them built. And that's really how I paid my way through school. That and some very generous support from the folks at Duke. And so that's one of my big charities today because they were great to me when I needed it.
So here's the real question. Mm-hmm. Are you more of a Duke fan than you are a Redskins fan?
Well, that's a pretty easy question right now, isn't it? Right? I'm both, actually. If you look at my Twitter feed, it says Duke and Redskins. But I think so. I really believe in the culture that Duke has created on a number of levels. And I'm not a big fan of the culture that the Redskins have created. And in fact, I have a Redskins license plate. It says, Washington Redskins, and I'm going to change the bottom to football team. Just because I knew I was on the wrong side of that issue when Dan Snyder came out so vehemently on the other side of the issue. I was like, man, if I'm on the same side as Dan Snyder on that issue, I'm probably on the wrong side of the issue. He and I just don't see eye to eye on how to manage organizations and things like that. So I'm still a Washington football fan to the core, but boy, They make it hard, don't they?
Hashtag Startup Grind at Payne Joe.
At Payne Joe.
Payne Joe, okay, great. I wanted to start pre-Eloqua, MicroStrategy. So, talk about your position as CMO at MicroStrategy and how that helped you to become an effective CEO at Eloqua.
Yeah, I grew up in marketing. I was, when I came out of business school, I went into consulting, and my last case in consulting, and were any of you here for Nigel Morris's talk? One person, great. Z was there, right? And you were here because I saw you on the tape, right? Well, Nigel was at this consulting firm that I was at the exact same time. And he worked on credit cards for Bank of Richmond, and I worked on credit cards for TD Bank. And so it was about marketing, and I fell in love with marketing, customer segmentation, trying to figure out where your most profitable customers are. And that's a really important lesson for me, is I came at marketing as a quant early on, which is let's look at the numbers, let's segment our customers, let's look at where to make money. Folks, that's marketing. Marketing isn't blasting emails at people and standing at a trade show booth. Marketing is all about figuring out what the right product and promotional mix is for your company, and what the right positioning is for you to maximize the value of your company. So I grew up doing that, and I went to Procter & Gamble for a summer. I went to Coca-Cola, and then I finally got into the tech industry and started doing marketing and tech, which led me eventually to MicroStrategy, where I was the chief marketing officer. For me, it was a interesting experience, and it was a fabulous experience. I mean, a lot of you are too young to remember this, but when I arrived at MicroStrategy in 1999, our stock price was $7, right? And a year later, and we had 1,000 employees, and a year later, our stock price was $330, and we had 2,000 employees. A year after that, our stock price was $7, and we had 1,000 employees. So you can imagine going through that. And in the middle, oh my God, it was everything from, we ran a couple ads on the Super Bowl, we went on cruises, our stock price would go up $50 a day. I worked with some of the best companies in the world at Blockbuster and at Ameritrade and some other things like that. But it was crazy, and those were crazy days. And what I learned there is, what really helped me there was being a CMO of a B2B company. It was really easy then when I went to a company that sold software to CMOs of B2B companies. Because if you can stand there with a customer and go out to dinner with the customer or breakfast or have a coffee and say, I've been in your shoes, I know exactly what your pain points are, and you could talk about them, it really helps. So one of the pieces of advice I have for all entrepreneurs is, it's great if you know your market and you have that background in your market. If you don't, you've got to find a way to get it. You've got to find a way to spend a lot of time with your customers and really understand what their needs are and how they think about their jobs, because it'll make you and your company so much better.
That's funny how you mentioned Nigel Morris and you saw that video. Did you see our video with Sanju Benzel?
I didn't watch the Sanju one yet, but I will. Sanju's
It was a
friend.
really good one, actually.
Yeah.
My wife went there to that event. She's like, she was the best speaker. She's not here tonight to say that you're the best speaker, but that's okay.
Sanju's fantastic. He's one of the smartest
really awesome.
people in DC.
Yeah.
And he's doing some really neat things in tech right now, too, over in Arlington.
Punch analytics, right?
Yep.
Let's get right into the Eloqua story. Tell us when you started. Eloqua was started with a bunch of 23-year-olds from Toronto. And then you got involved with them as a consultant when they were, hovering around $11 million. What did you see in this company that had huge potential? Like, why did you join Eloqua?
Well, you can imagine when one of the venture capitalists said, hey, can you come help me out at a company in Toronto? And he asked me this in November. I was like, no, are you crazy? I've already been to Toronto in January and in the middle of winter, and there's not a chance in the world I'm going there. I don't even care what they do. And that was literally my response to him. And so he's like, okay, fine. So a month later, he called me back and he said, hey, Joe, are you still unemployed? And I was like, yeah, I'm still unemployed. He goes, well, then you really need to help me out at this company in Toronto. And I was like, well, what do they do? And he's like, well, they do marketing. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Actually, I know something about that. He goes, yeah, that's why I was trying to get you involved. And so I said, absolutely, I will help you. But here's my conditions. 3 months. I'm only going to work there 3 months. And then I'm going to go on the board, because I want them to respect me and listen to me while I'm there for the 3 months. And if they know I'm going on the board, maybe they'll do that. So that was how I started. I started as the interim CEO just to help out. What had happened is, and this happens a lot in founder-led companies, the company had done fantastically and grown from, basically in the last 2 years, it had grown from almost no sales to 5 million and then to 11 million. So it was doing really well. But the founder, one of the founders, there were 3 founders, and one of the founders got a little out over the front of his skis, right? And he started really believing more in himself than in the mission of the company, and started making unilateral decisions without working with his board to do that. And listen, this is a mistake that we all make. I made it 5 years earlier when I started, when I was at eSecurity, a security company here. And I, didn't manage my board well and didn't manage the communication well, et cetera. And he basically went and spent a ton of money, way more than was in the budget, and way more than they really had available. And then also threw it in the face of the existing investors. Hey, by the way, I don't care what you think because I'm going to raise money from a new investor. And what he didn't realize is, well, actually, by that point, they controlled the company. So if you behave that way and you take that kind of tone, you're going to end up on the street, and that's kind of what happened. And I think, and Mark Organ, who was that founder, he learned a lot from that. And he's running a company called Influitive today, and he's applying a lot of the lessons that he learned in that communication process, and I think he's doing better on this particular startup. You know, just to add to that, so I went there for 3 months. I fell in love with the company. Here's a SaaS company that was in a really interesting space. And from the first minute I got there, I was like, this could be big. And the only reason I knew that is because I had been a CMO, and I was like, I would buy this. Kind of software. But what I found there was what you find often in startups, which is they weren't paying a lot of attention to their customers. You know, they had gotten big enough, around $10 million in sales, that they started believing their own stuff. And they started saying, it's all about our vision. Our vision is this. And at the time, they were really focused on their vision of building a multi-channel marketing opportunity, which brought direct mail and print all together with email. And so in the first week I was there, I literally met with 3 customers just to say, hey, I don't have any dog in the fight here. How's the company doing? And they told me the pricing model's terrible. They don't listen to us on pricing. They told us the product UI isn't very good, and we're struggling with that. And they said, the company's focused on these new products around print that we have no intention of ever spending any more money in print as a B2B company ever again now that there's email. So I'm not sure why they're going there. So what I was able to bring to the table and help these folks is just sit down and get the team communicating with each other and getting the team to listen to customers. And Brian, if you don't mind, I love to differentiate what I mean by listening to customers, because I think this is often misunderstood. It's not about going out and doing surveys with your customers and seeing what they say in their surveys. It's really understanding what their needs are, right? And building products that fit their needs. In fact, if you listen to your customers as to what they tell you they want, oftentimes you're going to go into a black hole and an abyss, because your best customers they're not visionaries. They're going to take you down. I want this feature, I want this feature, I want this feature, I want this feature. One of my favorite stories came from my time at Procter & Gamble. Anybody here heard of the brand Tide? Right? Okay, great. You guys wash your clothes. Excellent. So Tide was doing all this research about 20 years ago, and what they do that's really important, and I still believe in to this day, is they watch people do their job. So you know there's labs that do this, et cetera, but you should do it. You literally watch people use your products to do their job. So these people were hiding in this lady's basement. She knew they were there, so technically they weren't hiding, but they were literally crouched in her basement. She comes down the stairs with her laundry, this is 20 years ago, with her box of Tide, and she stops at the washing machine. She reaches over and grabs a giant screwdriver off the wall. And they all kind of like, what's going on here? And she grabs her box of Tide, she takes the screwdriver, and she goes bang, 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 and then rips the top off. And everyone, all the Procter & Gamble people's eyes light up. They're like, what just happened there? Pull out her survey. And they pull out her survey. And there's a question in the survey that specifically says, tell us about opening the box. Is it easy, hard, is it a problem, whatever. And she had said, no problem, right? Because this is what she's used to doing. So if you ask her in her survey, she has it's an easy opening box. Now, here's what's interesting about that. That business doesn't grow very rapidly. The soap business doesn't grow very rapidly. It goes 1 or 2% a year, et cetera. The year that they introduced a little flap on the side that peeled down, that was the first easy opening box, they grew double digits in growth on a brand as big as Tide, right? And then they went on to realize, oh my gosh, what if we make it even easier? And we have screw top lids for liquids and all kinds of other stuff. And so they really embraced that. But that's a story that I tell my product managers all the time, because sometimes you have to go sit with people while they do their job and to really understand what they do. You cannot ask them. And it brings up an old Henry Ford quote, and probably all of you know it, which Henry Ford said, If I asked my customer what he wanted, he would have said a faster horse. Unfortunately, I didn't. What he wanted was transportation, so I built a car. And I think that's a thing that something I strongly believe in.
Sure. I wanted to switch gears a little bit here, because I've gone through probably like 3 hours, 4 hours of videos of you talking to various groups and stuff. And so
God bless you.
it's actually really interesting. He's really intriguing. You had said in the past 4 startups. So how many enterprise startups do we have in here? Raise your hand. Okay, these 2 are going to bug you after the interview here.
What's everybody else?
This is good. They're here for the pizza. So you had said raise as little as possible for a startup, and then you actually did that. I mean, you raised close to 35 million on about 100 million in recurring revenues. You didn't raise for another 5 years between the best Series C to IPO. So what does it mean when you say raise as little as possible? Like, how do we figure out this amount? I mean, is it like, do we have to look at the 3, 6, 9 month runway? What is the maximum amount should we raise if we decide that we need to?
That's, there's no right answer to that question. And every company's different, every situation's different, the time is different. Money, right now, money is really, really cheap. Okay, so when I said that, money was a lot more expensive, right? And so you have to pay attention to, is money cheap, is money expensive, what are the valuations, et cetera. The way we ran our company is not the way everybody does it. And it's certainly not what I call the West Coast offense, right? So the West Coast offense is you spend and spend and spend and spend until there's not 1% of growth left. So, that means you got to raise money and raise money and raise money, and you keep spending and spending for growth. And by the way, the West Coast offense has worked extraordinarily well for lots of companies out there, right? And so you see, and in particular, it's worked very well for lots of investors out there. It doesn't always work well for the entrepreneurs. How many of you have heard of the company Marketo? Probably most of you, right? A lot of you, right? So Marketo is a marketing automation company that competed with Eloqua, and they followed the West Coast offense, meaning at 20 million in revenue, they were spending 50 million. So they lost the year they had 20 million in revenue, they lost 30 million. Okay, but they grew the next year to, they doubled the company. They got to 40 million. When they did 40 million, they were spending 80 million. So they were burning an incredible amount of cash. Where does that cash come from? That comes from investors. And investors are happy to give you that cash because what happens when they give you that cash? They own the company, right? Have any of you heard of a company called Pardot? Okay, the founder of Pardot sold his company to ExactTarget. The founder of Pardot made way more money selling his company to ExactTarget than the founders of Marketo. I mean, like 10x more money than the founders of Marketo will ever make because he followed a different strategy, which is he said, look, I'm not going to raise a bunch of money. I'm going to build a nice company, and I'm going to sell it for $100 million. And when he sold it for $100 million, I think he took home like $90 million, So, Marketo's worth 1.4 or 5 billion today, or depending on whatever the stock price is. And there's nobody at Marketo other than the investors who put all that money in along the way. They're going to make those kind of returns today. So when I say run the East Coast offense, what I would say is, do what's right for you. If you have growth coming, I'm on a couple of boards right now, like TrackMaven. We're growing like crazy, right? And so we grew 300% last year. So we're taking money today and investing it in growth, and we are burning a lot of money. And I mean, is Alan here? Because Alan would say, we're not burning a lot of money, but we are burning a lot of money. We're burning money today, and the reason we're burning money is because money's relatively inexpensive today, because it's cheaper than it's ever been, and because our growth rate is so high that it's a smart move for us to do that, and that's partially why money is cheap. But if you're not growing that fast, just be careful of your burn rate because that money comes out of your employees and your friends and family who invested in you and all those people that have invested in you. That comes out of your stake in the organization. And just to put a point on it, we raised money in 2007 when money was cheap, and in 2008 when the recession started in that October. I brought my management team together and I said, guys, male and female, I use guys euphemistically, apologize. Guys, if we have to raise money next year, and because we were burning $20 million a year at that time, if we have to raise money next year, it's going to come out of us. It's going to be really expensive. And everyone was like, yeah, so we lived through the recession. We're not going to do that. That day, we made a tough decision. We cut 20% of our cost. How do we do that? We cut 20% of our headcount in one day. We treated everybody nicely. We gave everybody severance. We did, we tried to help people get jobs other places. But for us to survive, that's what we had to do. What was interesting is almost every one of those people bought their stock on the way out. They exercised their options, which is very unusual, right? And in the end, that paid off great for them. When we didn't raise another penny from that moment on. We ran break even the whole way. And that's the East Coast offense. The East Coast offense is when you get to a certain scale, and for us, we were about 40 million at that, maybe 30 million at that point. We took every dollar we made and we invested it back into growth, but we didn't invest more than we made. And that really paid off. When we sold the company to Oracle for $957 million, we had over 30 people make over $1 million. We had over 300 make over 100,000, and a lot of those people were in the high hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it was life-changing money because it's a lot of young people. And then we had all the original investors, the moms and the dads and the friends and the family that put money in. They all made money on their investments. Like that almost never happens in tech. And so that's something that we're very proud of, and it has all to do with our capital strategy.
I have to be very selective with my questions here, so I think I have maybe 2 or 3 questions I can put in here. I wanted to talk about, since you're talking about reinvesting in your company with extra cash that you get, I want to talk about the new rave these days called the CAC ratio. So in other words, it's customer acquisition cost ratio. And so you guys can Google it, just do CAC ratio Bessemer. And they have this thing on the Bessemer website called One Number to Manage Your SaaS Sales and Marketing Spend, the CAC ratio. Did you guys use this CAC ratio a lot? I mean, and do you use that with the startups that you advise?
Yeah, what's great about being a software as a service company today or a subscription company is that our businesses are better instrumented today than you could ever instrument a business. And so if you're running, first of all, how many people here are involved in SaaS businesses today? A number of you, right? Anybody else? How about technology? How many of you are involved in technology in some way, shape, or form, right? So most of you. We have more data than ever before, and what's great about data is it helps you run your business, and you don't have to be like, I think this or I think that. One of our mantras at Eloqua is, what's the data say? And you just look at the data. And so CAC ratio is a great ratio to look at for your sales and marketing costs to help you decide. I'm not even going to try to define it.
Well, I can define it right now. I mean, basically, CAC is gross margins divided. So gross margins, revenue minus costs, cost of goods sold. So that's like your, gross margins divided by your sales and marketing cost.
Of the previous period.
Of the previous period, right.
And so what that does is that basically tells you, are you getting more gross margin for your sales and marketing? Don't worry about all your other costs, And so if you're growing your business, if your sales and marketing costs are less than your gross margin, then you should just keep funneling more sales and marketing in so you can grow. It is a good ratio, right? And it's an important ratio, and everyone's using it today to justify incredible spending. What I was going to say is there's about 10 different things you ought to be using to look at your business as a whole. And I see there's a lot of startups that just use CAC ratio and as the be-all, end-all. There's a lot that I would want you to look at. And I would say the most important metric I'm going to give you 2. The 2 most important metrics for a SaaS company are net MRR. So net monthly recurring revenue. That takes in what you sold and versus what went out the back door. And that's really the measure of your growth. But the other one that's really easy to nail down is retention rate. If you're in a subscription business, you need to look hard and investigate hard at how many people are staying with you when it's renewal time. And you should look at it very critically. You should look at it and say, man, let's look at it the harshest way, which is what's up for renewal and how much of it did renew. And don't fudge the numbers to make it look as best as possible. Look at it in the worst light possible and share that with your entire company. And that was where we had a lot of success at Eloqua, because what we found is if you figure out why people are leaving you and you figure that out early on, because it's a big step to buy software and then say, I don't want it anymore. If you focus on those people, you'll figure out what you're doing wrong. You're either selling to the wrong people, pricing it the wrong way, building bad technology. You're probably not educating your users and supporting them and changing how they do their business. There's a whole bunch of reasons. But we used that. We had something called a money-back guarantee. And instead of waiting 12 months to have them not renew, we offered them a 6-month money-back guarantee. And they can cancel in that first 6 months. And I loved it when somebody canceled. Because for me, when somebody canceled, it was like a science experiment. It's like, oh my God, that's the canary in the coal mine. Somebody just went through the effort of buying our software, trying to start it, and then canceling it. Let's go find out really what happened. And not like, because the natural reaction is, oh, that company's dumb, or they lost budget, or our champion left. And if those are the answers, then you've got the wrong answers. Because the answer has to be, what did we do wrong? Because if your champion left, it's like, so what we did wrong is we didn't integrate ourselves into the organization so that if the champion left, we were still going to stay. Or if they lost budget, it's we didn't qualify that well to understand why they didn't have budget. Or if they said that we said something in the sales cycle, okay, that happened to us. The way I solved that is, hey, if anyone ever cancels, then the entire sales commission gets yanked, right? Every single cent of it. That has a great restrictor on people overselling at the front end. You know, they all of a sudden got careful not to say the wrong thing. They didn't want to lose their commission on the back end, right? There's nothing more painful for a salesperson than taking money back out of their wallet, right? It's one thing to lose something, but to actually reach into the wallet and say, thank you very much, I'm taking that back. The message gets delivered loud and clear. So think about your customers as a canary in the coal mine, those that don't renew. And don't be angry and don't be mad and don't be pointing the finger. Because if you start pointing the finger about, oh, well, Johnny didn't train them properly, like, it's a we problem. Because if we didn't train them properly and that's truly the answer, we don't want Johnny justifying all the reasons why. We want Johnny in on the solution too, because that's how you solve your next problem and your next problem and your next problem. And I think startups really struggle with that because they feel like, oh, we need to keep everything positive, we don't want to focus on the negative and all that kind of stuff. And there's a way to keep it positive and still really get back down to what's really happening in our business and how can we get better.
So you mentioned about the money back guarantee, and that was one of your favorites. I mean, what are some of the other good perks for SaaS subscriptions? Like money back guarantee. You also had mentioned maybe guaranteeing a price. Did you guys have that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good question. So we had a 3-year price guarantee because you know what customers hate? Customers hate it when their price goes, oh, I'm going to buy something. And so we just put it on the table. Look, we'll guarantee your price. If you buy the same thing, we'll give it to you for the same price for 3 years, even if you only buy it for 1 year from us. No, you don't have to commit to 2 or 3 years. And the trick there is that we wanted to sell them more stuff. And if they did buy the same thing, it was the same price, but if they bought more stuff, that was the way we were going to grow. And it was incumbent upon us to sell them more stuff, right? And to make them get value out of it, et cetera. We put our contract online. Most of you are probably doing that already today. We took out all the nasty terms that they always negotiated out anyway. We just made our contract easy, and we wanted to be really easy to do business with. And the other thing that you should all have is some kind of smart start. A smart start that gets the customer up and running quickly, but also that gets them up and running successfully. And so in your business, if that takes $10,000 in services, then you should just tell them. Customers really appreciate it. I had a couple customers I talked to where I just said, we're not selling you the software. I called the CEO and said, we're not selling you the software. I got the order today, we're not going to sell it. And he said, what? Why aren't you going to sell it to us? Because your chief marketing officer refuses to pay for a smart start. And so if you don't do a smart start, you're going to fail, and then you're just going to be attrition for me in a year. And so I would rather just not sell it to you at all. Now, what do you think that CEO did? He'd said, how much does the smart start cost? And I said, it's 10 grand. He goes, are you kidding me? He called the CMO and say, just buy the darn smart start, And if nothing else, I earned credibility with the CMO. Now we're the trusted advisor of the CMO. So talking to your customers and having things like smart starts and money back guarantees and all that kind of stuff is
It's really interesting you mentioned about the Smart Start 10,000 starter kit. So let's talk about like SaaS pricing structure. Like how do we go about pricing, our subscription? If is it 1/10 of an annual cost of a regular license, or I mean, how do you? If I'm a SaaS startup, like how do I go about pricing my subscription?
Every business is different, so it really depends on who you sell to. Are you B2B, are you B2C, et cetera? I will say I have one pretty consistent piece of advice across all the companies I advise. And I want to just tell you what I do, because all of you I'm going to get emails or tweets from most of you. So today I'm on the board of 4 SaaS companies. I'm on the advisory board of 3 more SaaS companies, and I'm on the board of 3 not-for-profits. So that's 10 boards today. So I am chock full. So if any of you after this are like, hey, can you join our board? I want to put it up front so you're not offended, like, oh, he said no, he must be a jerk. It's like, I don't have capacity anymore, so I'm totally out of capacity. What I would tell the 7 companies that are all SaaS companies, it's consistent across all of them, even the one that's a $1 billion public company, is charge more. Charge more. Like, I'm always astounded. All the entrepreneurs are like, I'm going to charge $99 a month for this, and our enterprise edition is going to be $199, right? And you'll never make money, and you can't make money. Like, if you sell to businesses, what you want to do is build a product that can scale so it can sell to the mid-market and it can sell to the enterprise market. And imagine yourself someday selling to American Express. That was my biggest customer when I left Eloqua, right? American Express. American Express started out as a $30,000 a year customer for us. Looked like a mid-market customer, division in Australia. They bought us to do a little bit of marketing, and then they did some stuff that they found out about in the UK, and then they bought us, and then the guys in New York found us, and then they bought us, and by the end, they were buying over $1 million a year in subscription software from us, because we had a pricing model that allowed us to charge. We envisioned, okay, how are we going to get $1 million out of a client? And we started backwards with our pricing model, right? So if you start with a $99 a month and you can convince me that you're going to get me to $1 million, I want to see that pricing model. My guess is there's no way you're going to get there. Entrepreneurs constantly undervalue what they bring to organizations. And so I would just, there's probably somebody in this audience who's charging too much, but I'd bet a lot of money that's not the case, is you don't value what you're doing for organizations. You don't appreciate that if your software saves one person's time or makes 10 people 10% more efficient, that right there is worth $100,000. Right?
So let's talk about it, because you touched upon the concept that you had mentioned before, this whole land and expand. Mm-hmm. So when you got that, you had the $30,000 account, and then through word of mouth, one department talks to another department manager, and then they buy. So is that how you would suggest growing and selling to enterprises?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Build your product so that they can adopt it quickly, because enterprises adopt software today just like mid-market companies. Which is new. That's new to SaaS, right? It used to be the enterprise would do this big sales cycle and buy $4 million and bring it to you. And Eloqua, we had a couple of those. But mostly, with the way enterprises adopt software is they'd be like, well, this division's going to try it, or this geography is going to try it, or somebody else is going to try it. And then what you do is you guys, have you guys heard of hunters and farmers? So your hunters are your salespeople that go out and find new things, and they only eat what they kill, and that's the traditional hunter, right? And the farmers are the people that your account managers that take care of your existing customers, right? Well, in SaaS, I've coined this term called hunters in the zoo. And you want to have hunters in the zoo. It's the hunters in the zoo that we assign to the American Express account, because they're really hunters that we're saying, we want you to focus on our existing clients and go find business at American Express. And when you get big enough as a SaaS company, having those hunters in the zoo, they will generate a large portion of your revenue. Because think about it, your existing customers already have made a decision that your software works. They've already made a decision that they like you as a company. They've already put you in their enterprise. You've already contracted with them, so you have an SOW or whatever it is that they use. And for them to buy more, it's much, much easier. And you have a built-in reference. It's the division that's already using you. So getting those people to buy more is much easier than getting a brand new client. And that's why I really recommend when you get to a certain scale, you not only have hunters and farmers, your account managers who do renewals, but you have people that are aggressively going after your biggest customers to get more divisions, more capacity, more geographies, et cetera. And it's just, that's why I love SaaS and subscription businesses, because it's a fair exchange of value. I'm not asking you to buy $4 million up front in the hopes that it's going to work. I've already proven to you that it works in Topeka. Now I just want you to use it in LA or Istanbul or Turkey or wherever.
It's interesting how you concentrate on your biggest customers. So you have said in the past, this whole diversification on your revenues, you have said in the past that your biggest client was only 1.2 of your business, 1.2% of the revenue. So your biggest client was only 1.2. So how do we, as a startup, reconcile for that? Like, I thought, startups have always been told, hey, get the biggest client, get that big account. They got to represent 25% of your revenue. Get 4 of those, and you're set.
Well, math-wise, that works, right?
Yeah.
But listen, that was true when we were 100 million, right? So let's not. Your first client's going to be 100% of your revenue, right? And so don't worry about that. Don't worry about revenue concentration until you've got 50 or 60 clients. But being beholden to one client is really scary. You guys all know this. And at TrackMaven, we have one really big client right now, and every time I see Alan, he's like, well, we're trying to keep that client happy, because the loss of any one client can be so financially, it's just a financial hit. Your MRR drops, you got to make it up. It's hard. So I like the fact. I was weird in that sense. Like, we grew more slowly with some accounts than we could have, on purpose. I would rather have accounts start at 300,000 and go to 500,000 and $1 million than get $1 million on day one and risk that next year they're going to go drop down to 900. I didn't want to oversell anybody. I was in it for the long haul, And so I think that's also how are you going to run your business? Like, everybody wants to run out and get that big client early on. Well, when you get that big client, and if for some reason you're not ready for that big client and you fail, the fall is just as painful, just as celebratory as the win is. And so I would just encourage you, if you're in this for the long haul, and I hope you guys are, and you're going to build a great company, and you're going to change the world with what you do, then just take it a little bit at a time, and don't be greedy. And make sure that you're actually servicing those accounts, so that by the time they get to be $1 million, it's like you're really adding $1 million worth of value. And so you don't have to sit around and worry that, oh my God, they might drop us next week. It's like, look, they got here by going here and here and here and here, and they know what they've bought. When you sell that big giant deal early on, they don't know what they've bought until it gets in there, and that's when I think you get into trouble.
Hashtag startup grind at Payne Joe. Let's talk about culture.
I can see everybody's tweeting, right?
Well, they're probably going to be tweeting a lot on this one. So how do you set a culture in a startup? I mean, I was in the Valley 2 weeks ago, went to the 500 startup incubator. Sort of looks like this. It's a very small space. They had the ping pong tables. They got like Star Trek characters on the wall. I mean, is that culture? Is that setting up culture? What is?
Yeah, I think that's one of the thing that's most misunderstood about technology companies, and not necessarily by us in the technology world, but certainly outside of the technology world. Culture. First of all, we like to say culture eats strategy for breakfast, and I really, really believe that culture is the most important thing that you, as a leader of the organization, are responsible for. And culture is not ping pong tables. It's not free food on Friday. It's not free dress. It's not I have my dog at the office. None of that is culture. Culture is about how you treat each other and how you behave with each other, and the values that you take not only with each other but with your customers, right? We had a thing at Eloqua. It was really clarifying for us. It's called Get It Done, Do It Right. And that sounds so trite, but we actually lived it. And what I mean by that is, when you got reviewed at Eloqua, we use success factors for all our reviews, right? And so you got measured on 6 things. 3 of them were get it done, and 3 of them were do it right. And so half of your review every year was based on whether you do it right. Are you a positive source of energy for your team? Do people like to work with you? If you're a sales guy, do your deals come in clean? Are you pleasant? You follow rules. Do you do your training that you're supposed to do on the new products, etc.? Do you treat people with dignity and respect? And you'd be surprised how clarifying get it done, do it right can be, and it was for us, because people knew like, yeah, that's really not doing it right. And if our culture worked because we called people on that when that was the case. If it was me, if it was an executive, it didn't matter who it was. We held everybody to that standard, and everybody held everybody to that standard. And so, when I'm don't get excited about the value statement on the wall. Enron had the best value statements. Integrity, honesty, those were their values, and they were hiring hookers to work in their office. Okay, and I'm not making that up. And so, if you were an employee that worked in that, you knew that was not your culture. Their culture was a culture of greed, of sexism, no family values, of horrible things, right? If you find yourself in a culture like that, get out as fast as you can. Culture is about how you treat people. And so here's an example, a specific example of how culture, we used culture in our company is, I said to everybody, look, I've watched a lot of sports. I'm a huge sports fan. Every single retiring athlete says, I want to go to that team where I can win a championship. They don't say, I want to go to that team where I can be the best player on that team and be the MVP. And they know what they're doing in sports. Everyone wants to win together as a team. And every athlete will tell you the best year I ever had in my career was not my MVP year, but the year we won the title, right? And if you guys have ever won a championship of any kind, whether it's in sports or whether it's in any kind of team activity, music, whether it's at work, whatever, there's no greater feeling than winning with your team. And yet, when you look at the bonus plans of most companies, most of our bonuses are based on the MVP. And so at Eloqua, I said, we're not going to play for the MVP award, we're going to play for the Super Bowl trophy, which means we're going to all be in this together, and our entire bonus structure is going to be shared. So the bonus percent that I got was the same as Brian got, was the same as the administrative assistant who greeted you at the door got. We didn't have all the same bonus potential. We had different jobs, and so we had different bonus potentials, but we all got the same percent achievement of that bonus based on the same measurable metrics. There was no bullshit like, oh, I thought y'all did a great job. It was net MRR, cash flow, and customer satisfaction. And by doing that, we played together as a team. And a lot of people would say, but when we first rolled this out, people said, wait, but I don't help on any of those metrics. Really? What do you do? Well, I build products. Well, guess what? Our products drive our net MRR. And what happens when you build team metrics like that, then it takes away well, I did my job, they just didn't do theirs. And you've all heard that at companies you've worked at. Well, we built a great product, sales couldn't sell it. Or if product would build vice versa. You had all that going back and forth. And so we eliminated that. And that was part of get it done, do it right. Do it right for us is we're going to win and lose together as a team. And I will tell you, there were years where we got 90% bonus potential together. There was a couple years we got over 100% bonus potential together. And there was a year we got 51% bonus potential together. Now, that was 2009. That was a tough year. And when I sat in front of everybody, I said, I'm getting 51% of my bonus too, just like you and you and you and you. And by the way, most of our friends who don't work at Eloqua are getting 0% bonus this year. So we did pretty darn good. I'm proud of where we are, on the plan. That won't always be the case, but we lived and died together.
Okay. One more question before we open up for Q&A.
Sure.
And I think we'll probably have maybe 2 or 3 questions. I do apologize. I'm short on time. I always ask all my speakers about this particular topic, DC Tech. So you were in Toronto, and then you decided to come down here in DC. Why DC, of all places? You could have gone to New York, could have gone to Silicon Valley, where a lot of startups, they do go there. Why did you stay here?
Well, I think I already answered that question. I'm a DC native. I love DC. I've been here my whole career. Having said that, 2 of my last 3 CEO jobs have been commuting CEO jobs because there hasn't always been the opportunities here, and Eloqua is an example of that. I didn't move Eloqua here. I opened an office here. We had 70, 80 people here. We still had 200 in Toronto. We had 50 in San Francisco. We had 30 in Austin. We had 25 in Boston. We had 50 in London. I mean, and I had management team all around the country. So we were not DC exclusive, and I'm not DC exclusive anymore. I think you go and find the best talent wherever that talent is. So if you need a VP of marketing and you're a SaaS company, you do a search in Boston, you do it in Silicon Valley, you do it in DC, but if you find the best person in Boston or Silicon Valley, you hire them. And you learn how to be a better manager who can manage a distributed workforce, because the capability, the ability to get the very best talent is way more important than hiring someone in your backyard. And I really believe that. And that's advice that I've given to lots of folks.
Okay, great. We're going to open up to Q&A. First of all, do we have any City Pass members, VIP? Raise your hand. No? No questions? Okay, so we'll fill the first question. Anybody have a question? Anybody? Nobody. All right, there we go.
There's one. Yeah.
Oh, here we go. First one. He took a lot of notes, so I should give him the mic here.
Could you describe your communication style with your management team?
Yes. My communication style is over and over and over and over and over. And one of the things that I was just with the CEO of Luminal today in Frederick, and I was like, Josh, you got to talk about these things over and over and over again to help people adopt the culture, to help people understand how you're thinking and where we're going. You can't say it once and expect it to stick. Most people have worked with CEOs for years that have said things that go in one ear and out the other, and maybe they don't think they believe it. So I tend to want to make sure that we communicate. Now, cadence is very important. I'm a huge believer in a weekly meeting. If you're a CEO and you're not running a weekly meeting, shame on you. But everybody hates the weekly meeting. Well, that's because you're running it poorly, right? So make sure it's an hour, it doesn't go further. Don't put it on Monday morning. Everyone hates Monday morning meetings. Like, why would you want that, right? So we did ours at Tuesday afternoon at 4:30, right? And everyone's got to be there, and I'd like everybody to video in, not just dial in. And the reason I want them to video in is I don't want them multitasking. Because we're all ADD, all of us. We're all going to do our email and be on it. And I can be on the call and do my email. No, you can't, right? So I'd rather you pay attention to the management team. And the management team, I had a lot of unstructured time in that. And the management team are like, oh, we don't even have anything we need to talk about. And then we get in there and be like, we talk for a few minutes and we realize, oh my God, I didn't know you were doing that. I didn't know this was happening. I didn't know that was happening. Thanks for the update, blah, 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 blah. So, make sure that you're meeting. And then you're getting your team together off-site. I did it quarterly. Literally, have a dinner together, go spend some time together, and not offsite like, oh, we're going to go golf together. I mean, like in a conference room. And I said offsite because my management team always made fun of me because we called them on-site offsites. It basically means we were in a conference room in one of our own offices. So we really weren't offsite at all. We were just away from our phones and all that kind of stuff so that we could talk. Hey, by the way, can I do a quick shout out to Mike and Joey from
Mike and Joey.
Mike, just you guys raise your hands real quick or stand up, either one. These guys are entrepreneurs at American University. They've got a startup. They're doing some cool things, and I'm helping out the business school there. So if you're a seasoned entrepreneur and you see them standing around, say hello.
We'll give them the shout out. We'll do a shout out after this. Next question. We'll probably have time for maybe two more. So here, we'll just hand up.
Hey, thanks for coming and sharing with us. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about service companies, or different strategy and model from those who offer a product.
Yeah.
And if you could tell us a little bit about maybe the pros and cons of productizing a service versus just going full on with the service, and how you would approach that still in the technology.
Is it a technology service?
It is a technology service, but it is a service and not a product.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you, this is totally my bias, so just don't, if this is the wrong thing for you, just don't worry about it. Do your thing, right? Make a product, right? Use your services revenue to support your business while you build a product and productize your product. Almost every service I've ever seen has the ability to, it's hard, but to make a product. And the reason I tell you that is products are a ton more valuable, right? Someday, look, we're not building companies to exit. If we are, the people that I know that build companies to exit, they fail. The people that build great companies, they're the ones that eventually end up exiting and succeeding. So we're not building it to exit, but someday you're going to want to monetize some of the value of your company, and product companies are worth 10 times what services companies are worth. And they're stickier, and they're harder to replace, and all that kind of stuff. So that's totally my bias. That's, you ask a product guy what you ought to do, I see round hole, round peg, so if I've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail, so I would say build a product if you can. But offline, we can talk about how to run your services business separately.
Any questions on this side? I was trying to distribute it. No? All right, so I have a question. Okay. Well, usually I ask her the question before she asks it.
Thank you. So I have a quick question. Is right now you mentioned you're on the board of a couple of SaaS companies. So I want to know what they do, what kind of SaaS product they do, and as a board advisor, how involved you are, how you dedicate your time to help them. Thank you so much.
So I'm on the board of 2 public companies, Cornerstone On Demand and DealerTrack. DealerTrack sells software to automobile dealers. Cornerstone sells HR software. And then TrackMaven sells competitive intelligence for digital marketers. That's a DC company. It's my only DC company I'm on the board of. They're private. And Plex sells ERP systems, cloud-based ERP systems. Think like SAP in the cloud to run big manufacturing plants, mostly in the automobile industry. Look, I joined those boards so I could learn all kinds of different things. I hope to help them. The truth is, as the companies get bigger, they don't really want board members to help them as much as they want you there for governance. So you tend to have more fun the smaller the board is because the entrepreneurs actually want help. So that's why I've taken on a couple of advisory boards, because it allows me to work directly with the CEO on just to be there as a voice. If you guys are, how many people are CEOs in the room today? So more than a few. Like, have a set of other CEOs that are your friends that you can go have a beer with and bitch and moan and complain and keep it inside the circle of friendship, because it's a tough job at times, and I don't want to sound like I'm whining, and that's why you have other CEO friends, because when you whine, they understand why you're whining, and you can't whine to your own employees, you can't whine to your own investors. And if you want to keep your marriage happy, you definitely don't want to take it home and whine to your wife or husband. So I would recommend building that network of friends.
So I have 2 final questions, because I'm the interviewer, because I can ask as many questions as I want. But if you could go back 10 years, well, maybe 15 years? Maybe 15 years. If you can go back 15 years.
Am I that old?
20? No,
10
15.
doesn't get us very
How about
far.
5? Okay. If you go back 10 years,
Yeah.
what would be the single most important piece of advice you would have given yourself?
Buy Apple stock. Beyond buying Apple stock, for me, it's really culture. It's really about culture. I didn't appreciate that when I was younger. I thought if you build great products, and I had the energy then that you guys have today, right? And I would just work as many hours as it took and build great products. And what I didn't appreciate was if I could build a culture around success, around customer, like at Eloqua, our culture was really around a focus on the customer. And so it manifested itself in 100 ways. Like, we never talked about ourselves. Our competitors always talked about themselves. We never put out a press release that said, we hit this milestone, or we did this great thing, or we raised this money, or we this. We just didn't do that. We always talked about our customers. And then I talked to my company about why we did that. So to your question about communication, you asked about communications. I do things deliberately, culturally. I talk to every new class that came in. Why do we pay our bonus this way? Because we want to win the Super Bowl. Or when I was in Canada, we want to win the Stanley Cup. We don't want to win the Connie Smythe Trophy. And I would over and over tell these stories and explain these things, because once it gets inside the culture, once the people know that's not the way we act, or that is the way we act, or when we lose a customer, we don't blame it on the customer, we always blame ourselves. Everyone in the company emulates that behavior. So what I learned is I want to build a great culture. A book that really had a lot of influence on me was recently a book called Switch. It's by Chip and Dan Heath. If you haven't read it, read it, because I'm a quant guy. Like, I want to do everything by the numbers, and a lot of people are emotional people, apparently. And right, and it helped me to understand how do people process change and through emotions, and how can you help people process change through emotion. And so read Switch. My other book that I always recommend in an environment like this is Good to Great. It's old. It may feel dated when you read it. It is not. It is so awesome as a book to grow your business, and it applies to startups. When I taught entrepreneurship at AU a couple years ago, I used Good to Great as my textbook. And it worked really well, because the principles in Good to Great continue to apply. we ended up having everyone in our company read both of those books when they joined the company, and it was just so they could understand all the things we were talking about. You start talking about your hedgehog, people are like, whoa, what the heck is that, right? But if you understand that book and those concepts, it's really great. And bucket list moment for me earlier this year was I got to meet Jim Collins and tell him what an influence he's had on my life and on my company, and really thank him for that. That was special.
And the final question, it's probably the most important question. Ready?
I'm ready.
So, who's your favorite superhero or historic figure, and why?
Well, I'd like to answer that in two ways. The first answer is the glib answer. From when I was growing up, it was Spider-Man. I mean, Spider-Man, here's a guy who had a tough going. Nothing was handed to him, but he was awesome, and he was sassy. He was so sassy, always mocking his opponents, right? So I loved Spidey as a kid. Today, that's not really my favorite superhero. My favorite superhero today is Harry Potter. And let me just take the controversy out. Harry Potter is trying to save the world, and he's magic, so he's a superhero. I don't care what any of you guys say, right? And the reason Harry Potter is my favorite is Harry Potter has such a strong value system. He cares deeply about his friends. And probably most importantly, and this is something I wish the tech industry would really take to heart, and so hopefully you all here in tech industry take to heart, Harry Potter had a humility during all of his success that is something that you want to strive for. You know, when they asked Harry to start Dumbledore's army, they listed all the great things he had done. You know, you beat Voldemort, and you beat the basilisks, and you created a Patronus, and none of us have ever been able to do that. And he said, when you guys list all that stuff out, it sounds like I'm really great. But in the real life, I was really lucky. I had the help of my friends, and I had my faith. In this case, his faith was Dumbledore. Yours might be different. Mine's a little different, but he listed those things and gave credit to those things, and you sense that he really meant those things, right? And so when you think about how everybody followed Harry Potter to the ends of the earth, it's because he was a humble leader. He was great, and he did great things, and he had great talent, but he was very quick to point out all the luck that he had had, and all the friends that he had had, and all the faith that he had had to get him there. And so as you go think about your own leadership style, and you go think about yourself as a leader, think about how people would follow him to the ends of the earth, and think about when everyone throws compliments your way, do you deflect them or do you absorb them? And Draco Malfoy would absorb them, and nobody followed that guy anywhere. And so what I try to be, and the reason he's my favorite superhero is I'd like to be like Harry.
Okay, so you obviously told me the answer, and what I usually do is I try to run over to Walmart and try to find action figures of your favorite superhero. For Harry Potter, it was pretty difficult. They're not selling anything Harry Potter these days, so I end up getting. There's a lot of Shades of Grey stuff out there. I don't know. That's everywhere.
That guy's not my favorite superhero.
But the Harry Potter, I got you the Harry Potter DVD, Deadly Hollow Part 2 DVD. But no, this was pretty lame. So I got you what you had mentioned earlier. Spider-Man with a Startup Grind swag on it. So here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Payne.
Thank you. Just what everyone needs, right?
Thank you for coming out. Thank you.
Thank
All
you
right,
so
great.
much.
Startup Grind, DC.